we're looking today at your rate management in Homhero, how you can use all of the different types of special rates and promotions, as well as a new feature that we have brought on. If you don't already know me, if you haven't attended my previous webinars, that's me there, Tashana. Usually you would have spoken to me maybe in training and support, unless you're brand new to Homhero. In that case, welcome. I'm sure I will get to speak to you at some stage. That photo, I realize I'm a little bit more tan. That's when I was based in the Gold Coast. So I wish that was in a nice background like this. I'm actually based in New Zealand. For those of you that don't know, I moved back home to New Zealand. So I work remotely from here, but I can still support you the same way. So I'll host these webinars roughly every month if you do have a topic you'd like me to cover. And yeah, obviously you can reach me still on the phone via support, chat, email. I'll cover all of those options at the end anyway. But yes, back to my point, I'm a little bit paler than my original picture there. Okay, cool. Hopefully we have got some more people now starting to join so they didn't miss out if you were a couple of minutes late. This is being recorded anyway, so don't worry if you do have to disappear, you can refer back to it later on. It's usually sent out a couple of days afterwards, but it's also uploaded to our knowledge base as well. If you haven't seen, our previous webinars are now on our knowledge base articles, so you'll be able to find them there. Cool. So looking at all your different special rates in Homhero, there's quite a few things that I'll show you today. By no means you don't have to go in and use all of these. I don't know if there's any accounts that would actually use every single type of special in Homhero. So don't feel like you're really lacking if you've only got one or two types set up or anything. We just have so many options available so that you can set up what suits you the most. So it might be a little bit overwhelming if you're not really using any for now, but there are some that are much easier than others. Some of the easier ones are towards the end of the session, so do stick around even if it seems like maybe a bit too much at the start. We will have some easier ones. Cool. And at the end of the session, we will have questions and answers as well. You should see a question and answers box on your screen there somewhere. I won't be able to see those until the end. So in case you do have a question, feel free to pop it in anytime, but I won't see it right until the end. You'll see as well that you have the option to submit it anonymously, but in case I don't get to answer your question, I then wouldn't be able to see who actually submitted it. So if you can submit it with your name, it means I can reach you afterwards. It won't appear on the screen and I won't shout out your name or anything to say, oh, who asked this? So yeah, you can leave your name there. It just means I can reach you afterwards. Lovely. Our topic overview, things that we're going to cover today. I will start with some basic terminology just to make sure that we're on the same page from the start, especially if you are new to Homhero or if you have used other softwares before. Terminology can be the main thing to get your head around what means what. So I'll make sure that we get that covered right from the start. Then we'll look at how to do your basic rate updates in Homhero, the very basic way of updating your rates, as well as my favorite tool in Homhero, which is your rate query. This is really, really handy as you get used to rates, as well as when you are changing rates as well. It tells you, what your total rate is going to be, so you can make sure it's done correctly. We'll also briefly explain dynamic pricing options. Maybe you haven't heard of it before, or if you're not sure whether it's right for you, I'll explain it briefly. But those are external softwares, so I won't dive into how you can set up your dynamic pricing. I'll just explain what that is. Next one would be your seasonal automation. So you can see in brackets there, BRM is your base rate multiplier. So how you can automatically multiply your rates depending on whether it's, high demand season or not. Then we have short stay premiums, how you can increase your pricing for shorter stays, which means that you can then open your availability to increase your occupancy. As well as your discount options, so how you can lower your rates in Homhero depending on when you need to do that, all of the different ways. Direct booking incentives, so that would be your promotional code, which can only be used for direct bookings. Right at the end, we'll cover the new feature we have, which is your OTA promotions. Lovely. Starting with your basic terminology. Okay, so when we talk about the base rate in Homhero, or sometimes called a base tariff, This is the accommodation charge on the booking. So this part gets paid to the owner. Your management fee does come off that amount. So when you see the base rate on the booking, that is the amount that gets paid to the owner, and then your commission comes off of that. When we set the rates, obviously in Homhero, you start with your base rate. So you put in the rate to say this is how much the owner expects to receive before your commission comes off. So if you had $1,000, for example, as your base rate, and you have a 20% management fee, the owner would receive 800 in that case. Then we add packages on top of your base rate. These are the additional fees for each booking. So that would be things like your cleaning, a booking fee. Maybe if you watched one of my previous webinars, you now do a damage waiver, so that will be set up as a package. Things like your taxes as well. So Victoria and ACT, you will have a levy that is set up as a package. Lastly, we do the rate uplift. Now, rate uplift is a setting to cover the commission for your booking sites. So we start with the base rate, we add the packages on top to get the guest total. If it was a direct booking, no rate uplift, that would be your guest total. But if it's being sent out to booking.com, Airbnb, for example, we apply a rate uplift, which increases it to cover that commission portion that they're going to charge you. So that's sort of the order that the rates are calculated, which means that when we're working out which rate to set for our property, we don't need to calculate backwards and make sure that that includes all of the fees. We don't need to think, oh, okay, rate needs to include cleaning and it needs to include the tax. We start with the base rate. What does the owner want to receive prior to commission being deducted? And then everything adds on top so that you get to the guest total, which can be backwards compared to other softwares. If you've just started from another one, that will be tricky to flip. Perfect. What is important to note about the specials that we're covering today, now that we've clarified what those mean, is that your specials will only impact your base rate. We don't discount your packages like your cleaning fee. So if you've got a 10% discount set up, for example, it's going to be 10% off your base rate of the booking. Lovely. The last one that I've got there, I have separated it, is your default rate. I have put it down further because that is something that I want to explain as well. But it's probably easier if we do that from within Homhero. So I will jump out of here and I will jump into Homhero instead. We can take a look in here. Perfect. All of this that I'm covering the specials today is going to be in our demo account. So you'll see up the top there, demo company. We use this account just for testing, so please do excuse our very poor occupancy, any bad listing setups, things like that. We're just testing in this account, so it's not real data, basically. Lovely. So to get to your property rates, there's two ways to do that. You can go under your left-hand menu, you have booking engine and then availability. In here, there's a calendar icon for each property, so you could go there. Or you can do the same in your listings page here. So listings is where you set up all of your properties to go out, to your channels. This is your listings page. It also has a calendar icon on the right-hand side here. So if we click on that calendar, it goes to the same place, no matter which one you use. Cool. Once we are in here, we can see a lot of colors and a lot of text going on. So if you're not used to this screen, let me briefly explain it for you. We're looking at the rates for just this one property at the moment, okay? So this is One Hope Island. You'll see down the left-hand side, we've got all of the months, and then across the top, we've got all of the days of the week. So rather than lining these all up by the first of the month, they're actually staggered. You can see here, depending on what day of the week they are. This means you can easily see where your Saturdays and Sundays line up, so they're darker, so you can see your weekends. And yeah, on the left, it's kind of not all lined up because it's based on the day of the week. If we click on this date, for example, you can see it highlights yellow. So I'm looking at the 1st of June, and that is a Monday, so that's why it's over here. Cool. In that cell, you'll see some information about your rates. The first one here is A for availability. So if you just do standalone homes, this will always be 1 or 0. 1 indicates that it is available, 0 indicates that it's not. If you've got more like a motel setup or like multiple apartments in a category, you might see more availability for a listing. So you might have like 2 or 3, for example, in here, but most of you will just see 1 or 0. Okay. Then you've got M, this is your minimum night stay. So on this date, it's a 2-night minimum. And then down here, we've actually got 2 figures for the rate. I will explain this. It's related to that BRM that I briefly mentioned earlier. If you're not using BRM already, then these figures should be the same, okay? I'll come back and explain what that means. But that's a very brief overview of what we're looking at here. All of our dates, the rate and the availability and things like that. If you scroll down, especially if you're following along on yours, you should see that it goes to about 2 years in advance, okay? As time goes on, this will obviously open up further in advance. So we should then see June 2028 open up here. I'm just going to jump into another property because, like I said, it's our demo account. I've picked a bad example. Let me see if this one has got better rates all the way up there. Yeah, cool. We can see this one here has actually got our rates set a bit further in advance. This doesn't mean how far in advance that your guests can book. That is set separately, so don't worry if you're seeing 2 years of availability here and you don't take bookings that far. It's just how far you can set your rates, okay? So as your dates then open up, like I said, we'll see June 2028 open up here afterwards. If we don't have a default rate set for the property, then it's just going to be $0. So we want to set a default rate so that when your availability opens up, it has a price to apply to it, yeah? Otherwise, if you don't have default rates on your properties, that means that you're probably coming in maybe every couple of months, every season, whatever it might be, and you're manually adding pricing for your properties. You don't need to do that if you've got a default rate. It will open up at that rate for you. We do recommend that you set your default rate as the highest rate for the property. So for example, your peak season rate, or even higher if you want to as a backup, because we don't want to forget about this and then have your peak season availability open up and it's using your low season rate as a default, okay? So default should be the highest, it's your backup. As your dates open up, it'll use that rate, and you can obviously then come in and lower it. So to set the default rate for the property, because we're already on this rate calendar for this listing specifically, we can then go manage defaults up the top right, okay? This one here has got a default rate set. It does have a different default actually for different days of the week. So you can do that. You can see here Friday, Saturday is more expensive, and they've actually got their Sundays as a lower rate than their weekdays. So you can set a default in here for a specific listing. If I was to update this default now, it doesn't update any of the rates that are currently on my grid, okay? It only updates as our availability opens up in future. So if you're wanting to update any of these dates that are already here, this is the most basic way that you'll do it, okay? You'll do it from here within your rate grid. You'll select the dates that you want to edit, and there's a few ways to do that. So let's say I'll go back to this 1st of June. Remember when I clicked on this and it highlights yellow? That means that I've selected just this date. So if I was just editing this one, I could then go edit rates, this green button here. If I wanted to select a few more dates, I would hold my mouse button down and drag across. So I'm now updating these 4 dates that are highlighted. Cool, so I would go edit rates. There's other ways that you can select your dates in here. So you could select all of them on here with this checkbox. See, they all highlight yellow or orange. You could select just a month at a time. So I can use the checkbox by May. It'll highlight all of those. You can set by season. Now, most of you will already have seasons set up, and I'll show you your seasons shortly. But that's these colors that we see up the top here. So we've got orange, blue, pink, indicating our seasons. If I go set and choose my winter season, my winter low season, and I select it, move it over to the left, you'll see that it's highlighted just those dates that are in my winter low season. Okay. The other way you can do it, if none of those are suitable, you can use a start and end date to select your date range. I'll just need to clear the season that I've already selected. So clear that up here, and then you could select a start and end date there. So you can see it's running from the 15th all the way up until the 11th. Cool. So once you've selected the dates that you want to edit, you'll then go edit rates and type in what you want the base rate to be. Okay. This is the most basic way of doing your rates. So obviously it's very hands-on if you're managing quite a few properties and you're coming in and adjusting this quite often. If you are not using BRM and you're not updating the rest of like your minimum nights and things, that's all you need to do. You would just type in your number and you would save that. If you are using BRM, I will explain that shortly. We'll cover that and then how you would use that toggle. Okay. So hopefully that explains the basic way of managing your rates in Homhero. I'll just briefly show you actually, I mentioned how to set the default rate for this property in particular, but if you wanted to go through and check your default rates that all of your properties do have it, there's actually a bulk option as well. So I'll close this rate grid that I've got open, and in our listings page here, under manage, we can go default daily rates. And we can see in here the properties that have got default rates, properties that haven't are set to 0. So you might want to go through and check that they've all got default rates set up at least. Okay. Perfect. So that's your basic rate updates in Homhero. I do want to show you the rate query tool, which I mentioned is my favorite tool in Homhero. And I'll cover it right at the end as well, because it's really good to use once you have made changes to your specials. So once we cover those, we'll come back and look at how that works. Your rate query tool should always be at the top of your screen in Homhero, unless you were in a page like I was before, like your listing rate grid that covers it. But it's at the top here. Even if we go back to our dashboard, rate query at the top. Cool. In here, we can then select a listing that we want to check the pricing for. So we can select a property here. It does default to these today for 3 nights, but of course you can change it if you want to check other dates. I'm just going to leave it as that for now. So then down here, it shows you what your rate is going to be for that property. In this one, we started with a base tariff, so the owner income portion of $2,880, but actually there was a discount applied, a $300 discount. So that's brought our actual tariff down to $2,580, okay? And we'll look at the specials later, and I'll explain how they're applying down here, but in this one, we've already got a discount applying. So that's the actual tariff, the actual base rate that will be on the booking if we made it. Then we've got packages, so these are added on top. Like I mentioned, things like cleaning fees, booking fees, damage waiver, anything like that. You'll see there's 2 options. One is called inclusive and one is called itemized. So our ones are set as inclusive. That means that we actually don't break that down to the guest. We don't tell them about those fees that they're paying for. So if you were quoting a guest maybe over the phone, you would not say it's 2,580 plus 330 for fees. You know, you would just tell them this total amount because they don't need to know that that's broken down. Some of you might have your packages itemized. Things like your cleaning fee is quite common to show how much cleaning fee that the guest is paying, but a lot of people do have just everything inclusive, and that's fine as well. So if you see an itemized amount, you could tell the guest that they're paying the 300 for cleaning or whatever it might be. Perfect. After the total amount, we actually see the deposit amount that is due. So if this guest makes the booking today, this is the deposit amount. Obviously, it's arriving today, so they'll pay the full amount. And because they're paying with card, there would be a credit card surcharge on there. In our case, it's $105.05. And that's how we get to our payment total that the guest is paying. So starting with base tariff, take off any applicable discounts, add the packages to get to the total, and then of course add surcharge if they're paying with card. You can change your card type if you wanted to see what it would be with different surcharges. Now, our one shows domestic debit card. Yours probably shows something like Visa or MasterCard on your site. And you could change it to Amex, for example, if you wanted to see, if you do take Amex and that's a higher surcharge, you could see what the total would be with Amex. This one here is actually only available for our new payment gateway, which has been released recently. So keep your eyes peeled for that if you're interested. But that's a very brief look at the rate query, and you can see how that might be helpful if you have made a change to a rate and you want to check that it's applied correctly. Okay, lovely. So we'll come back to that right at the end to discuss, look at how your specials apply in here. I want to briefly mention the dynamic pricing. Like I said, I won't go into detail about how this works because it is an external option, which does mean that it's an external cost as well. We've got the two options that you can connect to, which is Price Labs and Beyond Pricing. Both of them you can find in your left-hand menu under Marketplace. This is where all of your integrations live. So Beyond Pricing, Price Labs, those are your two options. Dynamic pricing, for those of you that don't use it, automatically adjusts your base rate pricing based on an algorithm. So depending on what you've got set up in your account, it might be things like, there's a lot of demand in the suburb because maybe there's an event on for those dates. Or we see that, further out, we want to increase our rates if they're booking further in advance and lower it when it's closer to arrival, that sort of thing. So Beyond Pricing and Price Labs both offer that service, but there's a lot of detail of how you can set that up on their end. So I won't go into too much. We do have some articles in our knowledge base if you're interested and want to read there. But the way that that would work if you did have it enabled in here, for example, we use Price Labs. Price Labs would then send us the rate for each night to say, the 1st of June is $285 and the 2nd of June is $275. 3rd of June is $290. So they adjust it very slightly based on their algorithm. And that will update in Homhero. So you will still see what your base rate is. It will still appear on your rate grid that we looked at the start, and it will still appear in your rate query and things like that. So they send it to us and updates on our end. So that all still works the same. You will still need a default rate for your properties in that case. If you change over to these, you would still need a default rate because you need to start with that and then it would be adjusted. Perfect. Next, we will look at automating your rates a little bit. So seasonal multipliers or base rate multiplier, which applies in your seasons. I briefly mentioned this when we were on the rate grid earlier. It's a nice sort of introduction into automating your rates. It's obviously more hands-off than manually updating all of your rates on your rate grid. So we'll start with that. If we take a look at seasons here, which is under your booking engine title, like I said, most of you probably do have seasons set up already. Hopefully your screen looks a little bit like this when you log in. You might have really old seasons in here. If it hasn't been used in a while, you might find that all of these dates have actually passed and your seasons aren't relevant anymore. So you might want to come in and update those. You could make seasons inactive if you're no longer using them and set up new ones from scratch. But we'll take a look, at how your seasons work. So I'll use this one as an example, which is our winter, I'll just expand that, winter low season. So we can double click to edit that season. Up the top, we've got some default settings. So your season automatically applies to all of your listings, okay? When you set up a season, you don't have to come in and add each listing to it. So by default, all of your listings will have a 2-night minimum for this season, for example. They will also have a default multiplier applied for these dates. So in your winter low season, in our case anyway, it's going to be 50% of whatever we set the rate as for the property. Okay, and you can see here all of the dates that we've got selected. So we've got the date range down the bottom here, you can have multiple. We've got our setup, you know, for this year, next year, the year after. And you can see a visual representation of that on the right. So all of these dates are the ones that are included. So like I said, it's a good way to automate it because you could come in here and add lots of date ranges. You know, if you want to set it up for a few years in advance, you could do that. And then as your availability opens up, that multiplier is automatically going to apply to those dates for you. Obviously, that is your default for all of your listings. So you set the rate for the property, and then it will just drop down to 50% of that rate for winter. But obviously, certain owners can be a little bit more particular. They might want to, you know, tell you that actually we don't want to drop it that low, or they want it even lower because they're not seeing bookings, whatever it might be. So you can set different settings per listing. This is just your default. If you need to override that for a particular listing, that's when you would come into your listings tab here and you would add in the listing that needs a different setting. Okay. So in this case, Charm on Beechwood, one of our listings, is set to 100% multiplier. That just means it's going to use the normal rate. It's not going to drop down at all to the 50%. It's just going to stay at its 100% rate. But it does actually have a 1 night minimum. Okay. So all of your listings will use this one. You only need to add a listing in if it's got a different setting. Hopefully that has made sense. Another really good thing about doing it via your seasons, and a good way to sort of automate it, if you find that, say, winter is performing quite well and you want it a little bit higher, you could just come in and update this to 55%, for example, and that will feed out to all of your listings. Okay, so you don't have to then, you know, go into each of your properties and change it from $500 up to $550 and change the other one from $100 up to $120 or anything like that. This helps you automate that. You can just increase the rate slightly across all of your properties for that season. And then, yeah, if you need to do it for this specific listing, obviously that default will not update this one. So you would have to come in here and update that one as well. Okay. Now that we know how that multiplier works, if we go back to the rate grid, it will make a little bit more sense. So I'm going to go availability this time, and we'll go to, actually I will go to, does this one have it set up? Lovely, it makes more sense. So if we now look at June for this property, we can see that we started with a $100 base rate, but because it's in our winter low season, it's only going to be 50% of that, which is now $50. Okay, so that's what those two different figures here are. You will see some of our other seasons, so indicated by the color. If I take a look at my winter school holidays, for example, which is this dark blue, it's actually been set as a 60% multiplier for that season. So the rate has gone to $60 instead. So that's how that works, how it shows on your rate grid. If you wanted to update the rates on a property that is using your base rate multiplier, there's two ways you can do that. So again, we can select our dates here and we can edit them. Now, if I wanted to change these dates to actually be $75, if I put in 75 here, then my multiplier will apply to that. So it will go down to 50% of 75, okay? Or if I toggle on override BRM, that means that it's going to set the rate as $75 and it won't use the multiplier. It's just going to lock that in place, okay? So that helps if you, you know, don't really want to do the calculation, especially if you've got very specific multiplier numbers on your account. But what it does mean is that when you update your season, if you want to increase things slightly, it's not going to update these dates that you've overridden, okay? So completely up to you, whatever works best. You know, if you are just trying to fill in a gap in between two bookings and you just want to update this and override it, it's probably easier. But if you're looking at future dates and you're updating like quite a big row, like all of October, for example, you probably wouldn't want to override it. You would probably want to then put like 150 so that the 50% brings it down to the 75. Um, because that way it's not locked in place. It will still update when you update your multiplier on your season. Do let me know afterwards if you have got questions on that, if you are using multiplier and you're not sure the difference between, yeah, overriding or what's best for your case. I'll be happy to help you there. Lovely. The next thing we'll look at is actually increasing your rates for shorter stays. So Base Rate Multiplier obviously is really efficient to update all of your properties based on a percentage and apply it to multiple listings at once, especially when they've got very different amounts. You can use your percentage even though one property might be 1,000 and one property might be 100. It's just percentage based. But it does mean that no matter how long they stay, it's still going to apply that same percentage. So if you want to get a little bit more crafty, I would say, you can achieve a similar setup, but adjust that percentage depending on how long the guest is staying. Okay, so same sort of idea, just a little bit more advanced. I love seasonal LOS. It would be my favorite way of managing rates because it's still hands off, but it gives you a little bit more flexibility. So seasonal LOS lives under our special rates tab here. And I will cover all of these, but we'll start with seasonal LOS. In here, we've just got the two types set up. So we have this one, I'll use the Mermaid Cottage LOS. If we open this one up, we can see our seasons down the left-hand side, and then the number of nights across the top. Okay, so for example, if we look at one night in autumn, it's actually charging 300% of the rate that we've got set up. Then if they stay 2 nights, it's actually charging 150% of the rate that we've got set up. And as it gets up to 3 nights, it's 100%. It's just the normal rate that you've got. So that's quite common in your seasonal LOS, is to use this to increase the price for your shorter stays, because it means that you can open this up for a 1 night stay, but the owner is still getting the income amount from a 3 night stay because we're charging them 3 nights the price, right? It means that you're showing up in your availability searches a lot more. If someone is searching for 1 night and you've got a 3 night minimum, you're not going to appear in the results at all. If you've got it set that way because the owner wants a minimum amount per booking, you can get around that. You can have this multiplier so that you're still getting them 3 nights worth, 3 nights income of accommodation, but you're appearing in the searches for the guests when they're looking for a 1 night stay. It might still put you out of, price range for a lot of people, but if there's a huge demand as well, if you're the only one available for 1 night and they need to stay, at least you're showing in the search results. So that's really common to do it this way. You'll see for some of our other seasons, as it goes on, the number actually drops down below 100%. So you can use your seasonal LOS to discount your rates. That winter low season that we were looking at, 1 night stay is 200%. So you're just charging the 2 night rate for a 1 night booking. 2 nights, normal price. As they stay 3 nights, you're actually only charging 90% of the rate. So they're getting a 10% discount in that case. And it gets less and less. So if they stay 6 nights in your winter low season, you're only charging them 70% of the rate. And this can really help, especially in those low seasons where your bookings, maybe you want to encourage the longer stays. You don't want to drop your rates completely because then that will drop the rates for those shorter stays. But you do want to encourage some longer bookings. You want to be more competitive and get those on. So you can adjust it here based on how long the guest is staying. Obviously, this is limited per season, so you would have to have your season set up first and then come in and do this. For seasonal LOS, you can select which listings it applies to. So in our case, we've actually just got it set to one listing. But because this is a percentage, you might find that you've got multiple listings that are happy to be in the same boat. So you could have this applying to however many you want. Because it's percentage based, it will just adjust it based on what the price is for that listing. Okay. You'll see also that we have got pro rata toggled on, which means that if they're staying longer than this length here, the ones that I don't have filled out, it will continue charging at the last rate that you've got set up for that. So if they were to stay 7 nights, it would also be 70%. That's what that pro rata does. If you don't want it to do that, you would toggle it off. That means that 7 nights, it will go back to whatever your rate is on the grid. It won't use the seasonal LOS in that case because you don't have it filled out. The last thing to explain in here is your night offset, and this one is really tricky. So if you're not using seasonal LOS, do not stress if you don't quite understand how this one works. If you are using it and you want to understand a little bit more, it can be easier if we've got your actual figures. So feel free to reach out again afterwards if you want to know how this would work with your rates. But essentially what this does is decides what happens when a booking crosses over 2 seasons or even more. So it looks at either how many nights the guest is staying within this season or how many nights they're staying in total in the stay. Let's say, as an example, you've got a booking that crosses over your mid-season and your school holidays here in autumn. So they're staying 1 night in mid-season and 1 night in school holidays. Okay. At the moment, we have it set to season. So it's just looking, it's saying 1 night in this season and 1 night in this season. Well, it's going to be 300% for the first night and 500% for the second night that's in this season. So you end up charging them 800% of the rate. If these were set to stay instead, like we have for the rest of ours here, it's actually looking and saying, well, it's a 2-night stay. So for the 1 night that's in this season, I'm going to charge just 150% of the rate. And for the 1 night that's in this season, I'm going to charge 250% of the rate. So you end up then only charging 400% of the rate instead of the 800 that we had earlier. Still quite high, I know, but you can see how that would work then based on this setting. Do we check how many nights the guest is staying in the season or how many nights the guest is staying in total and use the rate from that column? Okay. Hopefully that makes sense, but do reach out if you've got further questions afterwards. So I'll close this one down. I'll just show you the other option for a seasonal LOS, which is actually a fixed type. So that means it's actually a dollar figure that we're setting in here. Obviously that makes it harder to group your properties together. Like in the percentage based, we can just group properties and it will adjust even if they're very different pricing because it's just a percentage. This one is going to override the base rate that you have got in your grid. It is going to set it at this specific rate that you've put. Okay, so it works the same way. If they stay 1 night in autumn mid-season, it's $300. Or if they stay 2 nights, it's still $300. If they stay 3 nights, it's still $300. So you're still getting that 3-night price for the owner if they stay for 1 night. And you can see down here again. So 200 for 1 night, 200 for 2 nights, or it's actually only $270 if you stay 3 nights. It drops down the nightly rate even further as you stay longer, so only $320 and $375 and so on. The important thing to note about seasonal LOS, and I didn't mention it earlier, is that this isn't actually controlling your minimum night stay, okay? So even though you've got pricing in here for a 1-night stay, the guest can't book it unless you set your minimum night as 1. So you would set your pricing up for that case, but then maybe only open it up for 1-night stays as it gets closer or as you've got a gap between bookings or whatever it might be. If you're happy for it to be open all the time at 1 night, then of course go ahead. But yeah, seasonal LOS doesn't control that specifically. You're just setting the price to say if it is a 1-night stay, it will be $300, and then you need to open your minimum night stay separately. Okay. Lovely. So the benefit of this one, obviously you don't have to do as much math and percentage to work out what percentage you want it to be because you're just setting the specific rate. But yeah, the downside of that is obviously it's a fixed amount, so it's harder to group all of your properties together. If you're doing it this way, you likely would have 1 seasonal LOS set up per property, so you might have a massive list here of all of your seasonal LOS setups compared to if you have the percentage, you might get away with, only 3 or 4 setups depending on your portfolio size. But yeah, you've got your 2 options in there. Perfect. There is another way of achieving the same sort of setup. It's used in a similar way, and that's our rate scales here. I would say this gets used less often than the seasonal LOS because it is harder to use, but it does have some more flexibility. So if you want to get even more specific than what we've just looked at, there's some extra settings in here. You can't use both. You wouldn't be able to have a seasonal LOS and a rate scale set up. Okay, so you would use one or the other. We do have some examples in here that I'll show you. So a really common one is the increasing your one night stays, like I mentioned on seasonal LOS. So this one here, if I double click to open up, we can see we've named this scale to be one night at a 2-night rate, right? So that's what we're trying to achieve here. Same as our seasonal LOS. Now you'll see that there's obviously a lot more settings in here. So the nights in calculation here, this is referring to the total price that we're basing this percentage on. So in this case, we're just looking at the one night rate, and that one night is going to be 200% of the rate. Okay, so pretty similar to what we saw in the seasonal LOS. I will sort of skip over all of the other settings in here because I'll show you some other examples to hopefully explain this part first, and then we'll go into the other settings, okay? So let's look at another example. Next one I've got is a 1 or 2 night booking at a 3-night rate. I've actually got 2 similar ones, so I want to get the right one. Here we go. I've got this one called 1 or 2 night booking at a 3-night rate. So in this case, we're actually trying to achieve a 3-night rate. We're going to use 3 nights for our calculation. Down here, we can see that night 1 is 100%. So that means that it's going to be 100% of our 3-night rate. However, when they stay a second night or a third night, those actually don't have any additional cost because our first night was set as the 3-night rate, and then we don't need to add anything on when they're staying a second night or a third night, okay? Because these are added together, 100% of 3 nights and then no extra for those ones. Cool, that's our second example. I'll get to a third one. This one achieves the same thing, but in a different way. So we still have 3 nights in calculation. We've used a different mode in this case. Previously, we had a mode called sum, which means those percentages were being added together. The first night was 100, the second night was none, and the third night was none. So we end up just at 100. In this case, it's closer to the seasonal LOS version. So depending on which night, like how long they're staying, that's the percentage that it will use. If they stay 1 night, it's 100% of a 3-night rate. If they stay 2 nights, it's 100% of a 3-night rate. And if they stay 3 nights, it's 100% of a 3-night rate. So these don't get added together. It only looks at however long they're staying and it uses that figure. They both achieve exactly the same thing. So it depends on, which is easier for you. And if you need to make further adjustments, maybe you're doing something a little bit more complicated than that sort of scale. There is the 2 different modes there. So just make sure you know which one you're using. While we're in here, I'll show you the other settings that we've got. So up the top here, we've got our minimum and maximum nights. So that's the minimum nights that the guest needs to stay to receive this. It's not really a deal, but to receive this, this scale that we've got set up. I mentioned in the seasonal LOS that this doesn't control the actual minimum nights on the property. In a rate scale, you actually do have the option that the minimum nights to receive this, you can then toggle on minimum night override, which would set your properties as a 1-night minimum so that the scale can apply. So just be mindful if you are setting these up that it will update your minimum night stay if you toggle that on. If you leave that off, then it would work the same as seasonal LOS. You would still need to go in and make your properties a 1-night stay wherever needed. We've also got getting a little pop-up there. Are you sure you want to override the minimum nights? Yes. We've also got a maximum night field in here. So if you don't want it to apply after 3 nights, then you can set a maximum. We can see down here that we've actually got a date range that this is limited to. So our seasonal LOS obviously is done by season. It's just applying to the dates that you've already got set up. Rate scale does allow you to choose a specific date range. So we've just got start till end of May here, which doesn't match up with our seasons, right? So you can select that here. Then we've got some additional settings based on that. So this one here called validate on. That means which part of the reservation are we looking at to check whether we should apply this scale or not. In this case, it's check in. So as long as the guest is checking in between the date range, then the scale will apply. It doesn't matter if they're departing outside of this. Maybe they check in on the 31st, but they depart outside of it, the scale will still apply because they checked in here. You do have two other options. Your other one will be entire stay. So that means if any of their stay falls within that date range, then the scale will apply. Could be, the arrival or the departure, doesn't matter. Last one is strict, which means that all of their stay has to be within that date range. Again, depends on what you're trying to achieve, but you have got those three options. The next one beside that decides, well, if they checked in on the 31st, obviously the scale applies, but the next part of their stay is not within the state range. Should we still apply the scale? Okay, should we apply the scale to all of the dates in the reservation or just the dates that are in that date range? So do we just want it to scale up the first night, or do we want it to, apply to all of the dates, even though they're not all within that range? Okay. So you can see how you can get a little bit more specific than your seasonal LOS. But if you are just getting used to your specials or you don't need to get too complicated, the seasonal LOS is definitely easier to use. The other settings I didn't mention is that you do have your days of the week settings here. So if you only wanted this to be a mid-week special, not a special, but if you only wanted it to apply midweek, for example, you can untick the, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, that sort of thing. We also have down here, I already mentioned the booking staying from date range, but you've got the valid to use from date range. That one refers to when the guest is making the booking. So maybe you might want it only if they make the booking in April to stay in May. Then you would put in your valid to use from today until the end of April. Okay. So if they booked on the 1st of May to stay within the May date range you've put here, it wouldn't apply because it stops applying after that. Further down, this is where you can limit it to your listings. So we've got 3 listings selected here. You can also limit it by category, which you can do in your other specials. And if you're not using categories, they are great. They're a way that you can group your properties together and completely customizable however you want to group your properties. So you might have, for example, houses with pools that might not be booking too well. You might set up a category that's got all of your houses with pools, and that way you can just select that category here rather than manually selecting each listing that's got a pool. And the other option here is your limit to seasons. So seasonal LOS can only be done by season. Rate scale can be done by season or by a date range, whichever one you want to apply. But if you're doing it by season, then you could do seasonal LOS. Okay. Cool. That is your rate scales, or at least the percentage-based ones. I'll show you one last rate scale, which is the fixed price. So same as your seasonal LOS, you do have the option to do it as a fixed price instead. So we see, again, similar setup here, 3 nights in the calculation. The mode here is base rate instead, so the fixed total for that length of stay. 1 night is $300, 2 nights is still $300, 3 nights is $300. So no matter what, they're paying that 3-night price. Okay, all the same settings there. What you will see on this page as well, now that we're looking at the overview of all of the scales that we have, is these OTA icons. These indicate which channels your special, again, not a special if we're increasing the rate, but this scale is applying to. So It will still send out to your channels like Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, we've got there. The thing to note about that, and the same with your other specials, is that it doesn't appear on the OTA as like a before and after price. We don't send through to say, hey, it was this price and it's actually been scaled up to be a 2 night rate, and vice versa. It was this price and it's got 10% off to come down to this price. Okay. All of your rate calculation happens from within Homehero. Like we said, we start with the base tariff, we apply any specials, then we apply your packages, then we apply your rate uplift. Once we get to that guest total, we send that total to the OTA. So the guest will still receive any specials that you set up in Homehero, they just don't see a before and after price, basically. Apart from our new feature, which we'll cover at the end. Lovely. Our next specials that we'll cover, these three, your night-based rates, your last-minute rates, and your promotional codes are ways that you can discount your rates. Okay, the ones that we looked at here, mostly used for increasing your rates. Night-based rates, these are the most sort of common of the specials, I would say. If you're just looking at how to start offering discounts, night-based rates is most common, and you've got a lot of flexibility in here. The first one that we'll look at here, I'll double click to open up. We have called this one $100 off per night if you book in April. Okay. We see similar sort of restrictions here that we see for our rate scale. So you can assign a minimum night stay. For example, if they have to book at least 5 nights to get this deal, you would assign that here. It doesn't update the minimum night stay on the property though, okay? So it doesn't mean that it's going to change your minimum night stay to 5. It just means that the guest has to book 5 nights to get this deal in particular. Again, you can set your maximum nights. So if you want to cap that, once they get over 14 nights or something, you don't really want to offer that much of a deal, you could set a maximum nights here. There's no free nights being applied in this case. I will show you an example of that one later on. And we do have the days of the week set up as well. So if you don't want to discount your Friday, Saturdays, you can untick them. Then we've got our discount amount and our discount type. So like the title says, we've set this as $100 and as a fixed discount per night. So our base rate is going to be lowered by $100 per night. Similar date range settings here. So only bookings staying from, if it's only to apply to bookings staying in May, you would set that here. Valid to use from, again, this is the date that they make the booking. So we've got this deal set up because we really want to encourage some more bookings to be made this month. You have to book by the 30th of April to receive this deal. Okay. And again, limitations down the bottom are the same. So if this is only for a specific category of your listings, it might be your 5-bedroom houses, for example. If you want to apply it by season rather than by a date range, you could do that. This one we've got set on all of our listings. Most of the time, I would say not all of your owners will opt into a special, so you'll probably be wanting to set your listings or your categories in here. Cool, that's one of your options there, a fixed discount per night. Again, we've got your OTA options. If you have got these toggled on, the rate is being discounted for your OTA bookings. They just don't see that it's $100 off per night. You can toggle these off if you didn't want that to send out to your OTAs. Maybe it was only a special for direct and website bookings, then we wouldn't discount your OTA bookings. You might even do it vice versa. Maybe you've got a listing that really needs some more Airbnb reviews on it, something like that. You might only want to discount your Airbnb listing because travelers can be quite savvy. We know that they will probably compare you on different booking sites. So if they find that your Airbnb listing is cheaper than your booking.com listing, they're probably more likely to book that there, and then their review will go on your Airbnb listing. So you can bump up your score there. So completely up to you how you set up your specials. If you want it on all of your channels, if you just want it to encourage bookings via a specific channel, toggle these off. Lovely. I'll show you some other examples of how you can use night-based rates so it doesn't have to be a fixed discount. This one we have is a 30% discount. We've got this here so that it's only applying to 5+ nights. So again, we're probably trying to encourage some longer bookings at a specific property or a specific season that we're trying to fill up. So quite a good discount there, 30%. All of the other settings I've left blank in this case, but that is just your discount amount of 30 and your discount type is percent. Cool. A reminder that that is just off your base tariff. Your cleaning fees and things would not be discounted. It's just the 30% off the base tariff. Next one here is a fixed price per stay. This one, yeah, doesn't get used as often as the other ones, but it can be really handy, if especially for owners that have got a particular rate set up that they want you to achieve, to just set a fixed price. If the guest stays 7 nights during May to August, we want it to be $1,000. Okay, so this type here being a fixed price, that is going to set your base rate at $1,000 for the stay. Compared to your fixed discount is how much is being taken off. So just be really cautious with the difference between those. Are you wanting to take off $1,000 per stay, or are you wanting to set the flat rate as $1,000 per stay? Your packages do still get added on top of that. So it's just changing your base rate to $1,000. We have definitely seen cases where people have accidentally set $20 fixed price per night, for example, instead of $20 fixed discount per night. And owners are not very pleased with that, obviously. So be really cautious with the difference between these two. Lovely. We have obviously set a maximum nights on this example as well, because we don't want, a 20-night booking to come in and still receive this $1,000 fixed price per stay. We want it specifically for 7-night bookings, so minimum and maximum of 7. It's just for those. Cool, last one here. This one has got those free nights that I mentioned. So if we have a look at this one, some people call this like a stay 3, pay 2, or stay 7, pay 5, whatever it might be. So in this case, we want them to pay for 2 nights. That is going to be our minimum nights. So it's 2 paid nights and then 1 free night added on top is how you would set that one up. So if it was the stay 7, pay 5, well then pay 5 and get 2 free. Okay, so I'll pop that back to how it was. Pay 2, get 1 free on top. In that case, you obviously don't want to add any other discounts here. You can just leave it blank like this. If you wanted to be extra sure, you could, go $0 discount or 0% discount as well if you want to really make sure that they're not getting any others on there. But you can leave it blank. Cool. And that one we've got limited to just our season. You can see in there as well. Lots of options in here for your night-based rates. You can see how as a sort of entry-level special, if you just wanted to start running, 5%, 10% off, or $10 off per night, you can test this out with specific listings and things like that. But if you wanted to get more complicated, then yeah, either your scale, or if you want to use all of these other settings, you can reach out to us and we'll help you achieve the specific deal that you're looking for. Our next two here, last minute rates and promotional codes, they're going to look very similar to our other specials that we've already seen. So last minute rates, I've only got one set up. You probably would only have 1 or 2 in your account as well. So if we double click to edit this one, the main difference here is that we can't set a date range on a last minute rate. We can only set how many days before arrival that this special applies. So this one here is 10% off once it's within 7 days of arrival. If someone's looking to book from now up until next Tuesday, then this special will apply. If they're looking to book now for next Friday, it's not going to apply because it's not within 7 days. So it's kind of a rolling date range. You wouldn't set a start and end date. You can, however, still set a season. So if you didn't want this applying during peak season, you could, limit it to apply to all of your others and not peak. But you've got your same settings here. If it needs to be a minimum of 4 nights to get the deal, you can set that here. And you've got your same discount types available as well. So that doesn't have to be percentage. That can be a fixed discount or a fixed price if they're booking within a certain number of days. This toggle here, cumulative, is different than our other specials that we looked at. Cumulative means that it would stack on top if you've got multiple of these last minute rates, okay? So you might have a 14 days 5% off as well. If these are both toggled on as cumulative, that means that they'll receive the 5% discount because they're within 14 days, and they'll receive the 10% discount because they're within 7 days. So they would both stack on top. If you only wanted it to be the 10% and you don't want them to also receive that additional 5%, you will leave that off. Okay, so these can stack if you've got them toggled on there. Lovely. That one's pretty straightforward because we've covered all of the other settings already in our other special. The last one in here is our promo code. Now, the difference with a promo code compared to all of the other ones is that a deal in here does not apply automatically. You actually have to enter the code to receive the deal. So this can only be done on your website or if you're entering a booking directly into Homhero. Even though we have got these OTA icons here, it's not possible to use on the OTAs. So I recommend keeping these all switched off just to save any confusion amongst your staff. So just have it on for website and direct. But I'll show you some examples in here. They work very similarly to our other specials. So use promo code Homhero. You have to enter that code to receive your 20% off discount. Okay. You can see the rest of the settings pretty similar. There's some additional ones in here that others don't have. So one of those being your deposit override, which is really, really cool. This one I highly recommend for a return guest deal. Makes them feel a little bit special. They're getting priority treatment. If they use this code, they actually don't have to pay as high of a deposit as every other guest. So if you usually take 50% deposit, you might set this as only 25% for our return guests because they've stayed before, you've built that trust with them, they feel a little bit special. Or, you might not need their full balance until 7 days prior to arrival instead of your usual 30 or whatever it might be. Cool. You could even do this the opposite way. So let's say you've got a group booking or a sporting event, a school that's booking out a lot of properties. You might tell them, look, yes, you can get a 10% discount, but you're holding a lot of our rooms, so we really actually need a higher deposit amount when you get that discount, or we need the balance paid further in advance than normal. So you can go either way. You can make it higher for that case or maybe lower for like a special for a return guest. Okay. Now you can also use your free nights in here. You can also use all of those other discount types in here as well. And the other feature which is different is your use limit. You can set how many times a promo code can be used. So especially in like a group booking case, like I mentioned earlier, you might say, yeah, you can book 15 of our properties at that discounted rate. Or it can be a really good marketing technique if you're sending out a newsletter to say first 10 bookings to use this code, get this deal. Kind of gives a little bit of a hurry up to people that might be already thinking about booking. They go, oh yeah, we should really book because it's the first 10, right? So if you put a use limit in here, let's say you put it as 10, once that code gets used 10 times, it just stops working after that. You can see in the background here also the use count. This code has actually been used 10 times already, so that would stop working in that case. Perfect. That is your promo code. So that's actually all of the specials. what I will do is just go back to our rate query tool. Now that you've seen how the rates can be discounted, where those specials could be coming from, then we can look at the rate query again and hopefully understand a little bit more what's happening. Perfect. So we can then select a listing in here. Let's choose Mermaid Cottage. So this is the one that we had our seasonal LOS set up for, if we can remember right back at the start. I've already kept you over time. I'm sorry. But this one is the one that's got seasonal LOS. So I'm just going to change that to 2 nights because it looks a little bit nicer. We can see here down in the rates breakdown, the base tariff on our rate grid is $80 per night, but actually our seasonal LOS overrides that base tariff. Okay, so that has brought that up to $200 per night. It tells you there that that's an increase of $240 because of this seasonal LOS that's applying, and that our new base tariff becomes $400. We've actually also got one of our nightly deals applying, so our night-based rate, that $100 off per night, because we're booking in April, it has actually dropped it down. So our $100 off brings it down to $100 per night. So actually our base tariff is now $200. So your specials do stack there. If you've got seasonal LOS and you've got a nightly deal, they will still work together. I'll show you another example. Let's go Malaga Dream, and I'm just going to change this to a 1-night stay. This one here actually has our rate scale applying. So our rate grid says that the property should be 800, but we're actually increasing it to be a 2-night rate. So it's brought it up to 1600 here. Okay. Again, we've got another special applying. So our last minute rate is then dropping it another 10%. It's decreasing it by 160 to bring it down to 1,440. If we then apply our promo code as well, so promo code Homhero, we can see now that we've got the 3 different deals essentially applying, starting with our scale to bring it up to a 2-night rate. Our promo code then takes 20% off that, and then our last minute rate takes another 10% off that. So we end up here with a base tariff of 1,152. Okay. Now, if we didn't want our promo code and our last minute rate to both apply, you may have seen, if you're very keen-eyed, and I know some of you would have, that there's a button in your deals that says exclusive. Okay, so if I tick this for the promo code and I save that, then I go back into my rate query to check my changes. Go the same one, Malaga Dream, 1 night. Okay, so at the moment we've got the scale and we've got the last minute rate. If I then apply my promo code, it's only my scale and my promo code because that code is exclusive. It can't be used with our last minute rate as well. And the reason that it's chosen the promo code instead of the last minute rate is that the promo code is a better deal. It's always going to choose the better deal for the guest. If you've got it exclusive and you can only have one, it'll choose the better deal. Okay. Lovely. Hopefully some things are all now starting to tie together and you can see all the different ways that you can manage your rates. Hopefully I've sparked an idea or two. Obviously don't feel that you have to rush in and set up all of these because that will be a nightmare to try and manage. But you might have something that's sparked and thought, well, this listing that's not performing well or this season that's not performing well, that's how I can trial something out. Last thing that I want to cover, and I know what some people will be mostly excited to hear, is the promotions that do actually appear on your OTA listings. So we have a new feature for your Airbnb new listing promotion, if you have heard of that. Airbnb allows you, when you create a new listing, to offer 20% off for the first 3 bookings. Previously, this had to be enabled on Airbnb directly if you wanted to use that deal. It can now be done in Homhero. So in your left-hand menu under Channel Management, you'll see now Airbnb Promotions. Okay, we can click on here. Now, because I'm in our demo account, I'm not connected to any actual Airbnb listings. Mine is going to be blank, but if you are following along, or if you take a look later, you should see in here all of your listings down in this column, okay? If you've got multiple Airbnb accounts connected, which you can have multiple, you would need to change between them to see each of your listings. So just change your Airbnb account up here. Um, Perfect. Now, I will briefly show you how to enable them, but then after that, I'm going to explain how it actually works and how it feeds through. So if you are following along, I would recommend that you wait until the end for the explanation before actually enabling them, just to make sure you're aware of how it is going to work. So yeah, like I said, all of your listings are down here in this column. Then you should see your listing IDs, your Airbnb listing IDs. The promotion type, now at the moment that is all just going to say new listing promotion. That's the only type of promotion that can be enabled at the moment. And then the promotion status. So your three options there for promotion status, you will either see ongoing. So if the listing already has that enabled, you will see it as available if you can enable it, but it hasn't been enabled yet. Or you will see unavailable if it can't be enabled for that listing. A reason for that might be if you've already had 3 bookings on that property, because it is just for new listings, this promotion type. Okay. So if you do want to enable it for the listings that have got it available, you would select the checkbox beside the listing, and you can select more than one if you find all of them and go, yeah, I want to tick all of those. And then you would go create promotion, that green button up the top. That will give you a pop-up window just to confirm that you've selected the right listings before you go ahead with it. But that is all there is to it to enable it. So under Airbnb promotions, select the listings that you want to enable and then create. Okay. So like I mentioned, it is going to appear on your Airbnb listing as a promotion. Yeah, they are going to see original price, then 20% off down to this price, which is different than all of the other specials than we've just covered. The way that that works is that we are telling Airbnb to enable the promotion on their end. So we do all of our rate calculation in Homhero. We tell them what the booking total is going to be, and then tell Airbnb to take 20% off. That does mean that it's 20% off your booking total, okay? Compared to your Homhero specials, which would just be 20% off your base tariff. For example, if you did a 20% off, that would be just the base tariff. Now, the result of that is that your base tariff actually ends up more than 20% lower. And I'm just going to jump back into our slides to explain how that works, because numbers are so much easier to look at than to just say out loud. So if we look at this left-hand column, the Homhero special, how it would work is you would start with your base rate of $500. You would take off the 20%, brings it down to $400. Then you would add on things like your packages, okay, to bring it up to a total of 900. We'll ignore things like your rate uplift and your credit card surcharge just to make it easier. So start with base tariff, discount that by 20%, and then add on your packages at their normal amount, brings it up to 900 for the guest to pay. Okay, so when you get your booking of $900 and you separate the $500 packages, you're left with the $400 base rate, just like you expected. Okay, you discounted it to get to that $400 as you thought. The way that it will work with the Airbnb special here on the right-hand column, you still start with your $500 base rate, but then actually your packages are added first because that gets done in Homhero. So start with the $500 base rate, add the $500 packages, so the guest total should be 1,000. But then Airbnb takes 20% off that total. Okay, so the guest ends up paying only $800 compared to the one in Homhero, they would end up paying 900 because your packages didn't get discounted. The result of that is that when the booking drops into Homhero, let's say it's $800, again, ignoring commission and payouts and things like that, but it's an $800 booking. We then separate your packages at their normal rate, so $500, which leaves you with only $300 for the base rate. Okay, so you can see that here when we take 20%, the base rate only ends up discounted 20%. Here, if it's applied directly on the OTA, they're taking it off the total, but then your packages don't get discounted. So that entire discount comes off your base rate, and the owner ends up with more than 20% taken off. Okay, so as long as you guys are aware of how that works and the owners are happy for that to be done, then that's completely fine. As long as you are aware that it will be more than 20% off the base tariff. The ratio of that will obviously be quite different depending on what your base tariff is and what your packages are. So the more ratio you have of packages to base rate, then the more the owner is going to lose. It probably will end up less significant than the example that I've given, but you can use the same sort of formula roughly to understand how much is actually going to come off the base tariff. Now that we know how that works, the other thing to note is that when it's applying on Airbnb side, it does mean that it's not showing in your Homehero rate query. So you wouldn't be able to use your rate query to confirm what the guest total is going to be. And if you've got any issues with the special maybe applying where you don't think that it should have applied or something like that, it will be quite hard for Homehero support to help you with that because the special is applying on Airbnb side. Okay, so if you've got issues with it, definitely reach out. We can take a look, but likely we would have to direct you to Airbnb support if we can't see why the special was applied. All right. Perfect. Not quite Q&A. Don't want to jump into that yet. We'll go back into Homehero. Very last one, almost at the Q&A, is you'll see under channel management, we've actually got booking.com promotions as well. Now, this has been around for a little while, and I wasn't too familiar with it myself because not too many people use it. So these apply in a very, very similar way. Any promotions that you apply here are being enabled on booking.com side. So that does mean that it's not showing in your rate query. It does mean that it is, a percentage off the total booking rather than the base tariff. So the owner will end up with more than that. More than the 10% taken off, for example. And yeah, again, if you've got questions about the special applying when it shouldn't, it's on booking.com side, so we would probably need to direct you to booking.com support. But it is an option. So if you do want to enable these, you've got a few different types. You have got your basic promotions. You have got last minute, so that would let you, select a number of days within arrival. Early booker is vice versa, so more than a certain number of days prior to arrival. You've got business bookers, so if they are indicated that they're traveling for work. Geo rates, so specifically for one country, if you want to give us Kiwis a really good deal, would be lovely. Or a mobile rate if you're wanting to specifically target anyone who is booking through the app. Okay, so a few more options in there. Now that we have covered all of our other specials, you'll kind of be familiar with all of these settings as well. So a name, a percentage discount, if you've got a minimum length of stay, which listings it applies to, when the booking is made and when the booking is staying. All of those are available for booking.com promotions. Okay. Perfect. I'm so sorry I've kept you guys so much over time. Let's go back if we do have any questions. Otherwise, I will wrap it up pretty quickly because I've kept you so long. Let me see. How many questions? Pricing edits in Homehero if you use dynamic pricing. Yes, I forgot to mention that your special rates that you apply in Homehero will still apply if you are using Price Labs or Beyond Pricing because those only edit your base rate and then everything else happens after that. So Price Labs sends us the base rate. We then apply discounts, packages, uplift, and send that to your OTAs. Okay. Default nights on the LOS simulator. Good question. This will be a feature request. I will send you a link afterwards to the person that's submitted that one. Someone has asked if you use Price Labs, do all of your properties have to be on it? Good question. No, they don't. You can trial it out for just a couple of properties, or maybe if, you've got some properties that really don't need to be adjusted that much, you can do it just for some properties. Cool. Someone has asked why you would do the stay 3 and pay 2 in the night-based rates as opposed to the promotional codes. So the difference there is that the night-based rates always apply. The guest doesn't have to put in a code to receive it. And it also means that it can apply to your OTAs as well. So really handy if you are trying to increase bookings for a really low season and you want anyone to be able to receive that deal. Promo codes, great if you only want to supply that to your return guests or to your direct bookings. And yeah, that they have to give you that code to receive it. Cool. Night-based rates for discounts on the OTAs. So when we're looking at the night-based rates in Homhero, that is just discounting your base rate. It's not discounting the total amount. So the 20% off example that we used earlier, I'll see if I can actually go back on this. There we go. It would work like this one on the left-hand side. So it would discount the base rate, then your packages would still all be added on top and your rate uplift would be added on top, all of that. Okay. Perfect. I will jump forward to our last tab there. I mentioned in the start that if you haven't reached out to us before, if you don't know me, this is how you can reach us. So we have got our contact phone number there, which is also available in Homhero down the bottom left corner. You can always find it there. Available 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Live chat within Homhero, if you click on the question mark or the help icon, you can get to our live chat. You can also search for articles in there. So if you start typing, it will suggest articles for you first. Then you can click on live chat if it doesn't answer it for you. And then all of our emails here. So for general Homhero support, you can use support@homehero.com.au. If you've got questions about trust accounting or most of your RMS sort of things, that would go to our trust specialists. They know a lot more about that than us in support. So support@hometrust.com.au. And questions about your Homhero invoice would be admin@homestar.com.au. Okay. There you can see a quick link to our knowledge base if you don't already have that. But again, you can find the articles via live chat and then bookmark it from there. And then also our status page. So if we do know of any service issues, scheduled maintenance, even for some of the integrations, sometimes if we get notified of like an RMS outage or a payment gateway outage, we might pop it on there. So really recommend subscribing to that one to be notified of any thing that we know about. Cool. And then lastly, my direct email. If there's anything that I've brought up today, like about the seasonal LOS, or you want me to take a look at your specific setup and discuss your scenario, you can reach me directly. Otherwise, support@homehero.com.au. If you can reach out there wherever you can, I'm still available on that one. So if I'm available, I'll be more than happy to take it, but it means that someone else could jump in if I'm not available. Okay. Cool. I will end it there. We will send through the recording for you. And for anyone else that has missed it, I know you can't all in your office all jump on, so there might be other people waiting to watch. We'll send that through. It's usually within a couple of days, and you can find it on our knowledge base at that time as well. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you next time.